Hey everybody, it's your boy Spyro. I just want to make a brief video on this because there's a lot of rumors going around on social media like Twitter and now YouTube is picking it up. And I want to verify something, okay? Now, we all know about the Activision Blizzard deal with Microsoft, and we know the CMA, and we know about Sony being accused of going to regulators and lying. We don't know that for a fact until it's officially stated by like the regulators if they come out and say it. And these are all speculations. I have to say that strictly for the record. This is all speculation. We don't know what's going to happen with this deal. A lot of people are saying it's dead in the water. Other people saying it's going to go through. We don't know until this is over with. Now, an interesting fact just came up, and I want to stress this, okay? Now, when it comes to what's going on with Sony flying from London to Seattle, and now they're saying that there's a source that came out saying that they're negotiating with Microsoft for Call of Duty to be on PlayStation and Xbox and all of them. I just want to stress this, right? So here's the deal. We don't know if that's negotiation for it, because here's why. And I tweeted this out. If Sony was caught lying to the regulators, that will look bad on Sony. And I know Sony well enough as a company to not like to lie to anybody. And if they do, there's repercussions to it. Because there's a thing called yin and yang. Whatever goes around comes around. So if Sony lies to the regulators, let me just give you some details, right? Let's say the Activision Blizzard deal doesn't go through. It's blocked by the regulators. And here's my point that I made on Twitter, and I'll say it on a video and upload it to YouTube. I don't care. But one, why would Sony want to lie to the regulators, then buy Activision Blizzard out from underneath Xbox when they have, let's say they did lie, right? Why would Sony want to do that? Because now Microsoft can go after Sony and say, why did you lie to the regulators? And the regulators will go after them saying, well, you told us all these, you know, things that are not true, and now you just bought the company outright from Microsoft, so you lied to us. So why do you think we're going to accept your plea by saying, oh, I should buy it? No, they're not going to let it, because this is what happens in politics and when it comes to corporate companies wanting to buy and merge other studios within their company. It happens all the time. But this is why, because it's not really a monopoly problem. It's the fact that certain companies like Microsoft and Sony are top dog in the gaming industry. Okay? Xbox and PlayStation are the two top dogs right now. There's Nintendo, and Sega just decided to do their own thing when it comes to software. They don't do hardware anymore, so they're out of the game. So let's say Sony buys Activision Blizzard after the deal was blocked. Why would they do that? Regulators will go after them and say, well, you told us that they would, not be competitive, and now you're going to pull a stunt like this. They're not going to let it slide because they're going to call them liars. And I don't think Sony wants to deal with that criticism, but it will happen. And I just want to state on record, as a gamer myself, an intelligent person, I am just waiting to see what happens with this deal. I'm not saying it's going to go through or fail. I'm not saying any of that, because people are going to take words out of context. And that's the annoying thing about being on YouTube is people say certain things and they take it the wrong way and people blow up over it. But all I'm saying is, I'm just going to wait to see what happens. Because there's certain things that Sony did in the past that I don't like not allowing a certain game to work on a PlayStation when Xbox and everybody else will allow it. And now they want to talk about how Microsoft is trying to block Call of Duty from their platform, and Sony, you've been doing that for so long. So how do you have any right to say what these companies can and can't do? You do it as well. So you're talking out of your own rear end. That's what you're doing. And two, Microsoft and Sony have their own way of doing business. That's how the business world works. They get an acquisition like Activision Blizzard, or I'll say it like, if for some reason, let's say Take-Two Interactive were to sell off Rockstar Games. Do you know what kind of companies would actually pick them up? I would think it would be either Microsoft or Sony that would pick them up. Even though Take-Two Interactive's still doing good on their financial quarters, so they don't have to worry about selling off Rockstar Games. They don't have to worry about that. But if it ever came down to it, because this is what I think is going to happen. I think if the deal doesn't go through, then Activision Blizzard will get bought by another company, or, worst case scenario, they go into what we call bankruptcy, Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which means that the government would have to look at all the assets and see what they can salvage and what they should destroy. Now, me as a gamer, I love Spyro the Dragon. Okay, I love Crash Bandicoot. I love all those old franchises. But I just think from a gamer pinpoint of it, those two will be out the door. I mean, they'll be gone forever. Because Activision Blizzard's top dog right now is Call of Duty. And we all know that. Because Spyro and Crash are down here. Call of Duty's up here. So, whenever it happens where Chapter 11 bankruptcy comes into play, they're going to have to separate all the IPs. They're going to have to start selling them off to other companies. Like, Call of Duty may go to another company, or Spyro and Crash will go to another company, or just flat out get destroyed. And I don't want that to happen. As a Crash fan and as a Spyro fan, I don't want that to happen, but that's how business works. But if it were to come down to it, and I think Sony should think about this before they do something stupid, you gotta be careful not to lie to anybody, especially regulators, because you're saying that Microsoft is top dog when it comes to studios. But here's the thing, people. Microsoft can sell at least 3 or 4 of their studios to another company, like Sony or Take-Two Interactive or any of those. They can sell those assets to those other companies so they would pick it up so they can buy it. Or, like the CMA said in their statement, all you have to do is separate Call of Duty from Activision by creating its own company. Like, let's say, Call of Duty Incorporated or something like that. They'll sell it off. They'll put it into another business, and that will make CMA happy. Or, here's the alternative. If you don't get rid of Call of Duty, no deal. It will be blocked in the UK. They can't fight it in UK. They could try, but it's practically impossible. And there could be other ways that they don't have to sell the games in UK, but I think for the gamers, they would be pissed off that they're not able to play the newest Call of Duty game in United Kingdom. So I think, and I saw this one video which was interesting, but it was nauseating, right? Just because the thing is, the FTC, I swear, here's the problem with them, right? They think that they look for competitive reasons, but they don't do that anymore. They just don't. And I agree to a certain extent that UK gamers, they're just like us, okay? They play games like me, you, and several other people. But I just think that you have to have an open mind when it comes to broadening your horizon, right? When it comes to a game like Call of Duty, it's massive. And the only one thing that Sony keeps fucking up is, now if you look it up, and you can look this up, I'm not BSing you, Sony hasn't even touched the Killzone franchise, right? They haven't touched that in about 7 years. Why doesn't Sony just go back to Killzone or create another first-person shooter game instead of relying on third-party companies like Activision Blizzard to even do like a popular video game? They can make a new video game, they just don't want to. They're lazy. They just don't want to invest all their resources into a new first-person shooter because they're like, why should we? We got Call of Duty. But I think that's where Sony is biting off more than they can chew. And I have to stress this, right? I'm not, and I swear to God, you can leave a comment down below and say you're a Sony fanboy and whatnot. I'm not. Okay? I'm a multi-platform fanboy. That means Xbox, Sony, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, Sega Genesis, all the old school systems. That's who I am. I criticize Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, especially with the way Nintendo's been handling the copyright issue. That is some other bullshit. That shouldn't even be, talked about. I mean, I understand you're trying to protect your IP, but you have people out there trying to help you, and this is the way you treat them. I mean, look at Rockstar Games. They created, Vice City, and then they want to fuck it up by re-releasing the same titles. That was the mobile version, which had glitches after glitches, and they didn't even want to hire any of these mods to fix any of the bugs in the game. They just wanted to repackage it and sell it for a certain price, and it was like, here you go, take our crap. It's just disgusting. But for me, I would be very pissed off if I was the CEO of a company that I was running and I was selling a game that crappy like that. Oh, I would raise hell, because that's not right. You're paying $40 to $50 for a video game that's glitchy as hell, and it took about a year to 2 years to update the system to where it works, but it barely even does. And that's just pitiful to me. It's just pitiful. But like I said, I'm only addressing this because I saw a rumor going around. I don't think, and this is my opinion, people, I don't think that Microsoft and Sony met in Seattle. I don't think that happened. Because if I know Sony, they're gonna batten down the hatchets and go to court. And Sony's gonna freak out thinking, why should we have to release our information? Yeah, they released some information, but it wasn't beneficial to anybody to tell if it was Call of Duty related, because most of those finance records that they showed, that could have been because of the newer games coming out, not Call of Duty. That could have been because of Horizon Zero Dawn and all the other games. So how's that beneficial to regulators if you're going to show? And not only that, let's think about it, right? Microsoft had a better time releasing the Xbox Series S because they kept production going. We had a major chip shortage when it came to doing the PS5. I would know. I've been waiting for a PS5 and I actually own one. But my point is, Microsoft did better than Sony. They really did. And I just think they're worried about hardware sales when they really shouldn't be worrying about that. I think the sad fact is they're so hook, line, and sinker into the hardware sales thinking it's because of Call of Duty. It's not because of Call of Duty. You have other games that you release on the platform, like NBA 2K23 or Need for Speed, which is owned by Electronic Arts. Like, you have other games that are very popular, and then you have Call of Duty, who's a third-party studio like Activision Blizzard. You have one game that you haven't even touched in 6 or 7 years. Killzone. The last game that came out was Shadowfall. That was the last game that came out for a legit system like a PS4. And that was it. Nothing else. That franchise is literally dead in the water. It's like a dead body floating in the water just waiting to get eaten by sharks, because you're waiting. Most of the gamers gave up on the franchise because you let them, Sony. You could have released a newer game and then made it so popular like it's another version of Halo. But no, you choose not to do that route. And now that game's dead in the water and you're bitching about Call of Duty? Come on, Sony. You can do better than that. I mean, this is pathetic. It really is. And I wouldn't be surprised if I find out that the deal went through. Because they'll say, well, okay, they split them up into different kind of company. And then the CMA let it through. And Sony will bitch, saying this is ridiculous. We told you that it would fail. Yeah, Sony, you don't get any support from me at all. Like, really, that's kind of shitty. And like I said, I'm not a Sony fanboy. I'm a multi-platform fanboy. So I know for a fact I'm gonna get comments because I'm gonna turn them on and they're gonna say, oh, you're a Sony fanboy or you're a Microsoft fanboy. I'm neither one of them. I'm all platform. Meaning, I have a Sony PlayStation Classic. Okay? I have an Xbox Series S. I have a PS5. I used to have an Xbox 360. I have a Nintendo Switch. I used to have a Game Gear, Sega Game Gear. But you see me talking about like because I actually own all the PlayStation systems and all the Xbox systems, so try me. I go all over the place. But like I said, before this video gets too long, I think, this is my personal opinion, I think the deal will go through. And here's why. Because let's say if it comes out true, saying that Sony lied to the regulators, and then they pushed it through, Sony will have a hissy fit. But if it doesn't go through, which 99.9% guarantee it won't, Sony will try to buy it up. And then Sony will get backlash from Microsoft and the regulators saying, why would you do that if you knew you lied? So it goes on a tipping scale. It could go Sony or Microsoft. So now we just have to wait to see if it evens out, and then we find out who was telling the truth and who lied. Because if the liar comes out and they were told it was a lie, then no deal. And I have a feeling Activision Blizzard will go into what we call Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which means they have to show to the federal government that they have to show what they can sell to even keep the business going. And that will happen if no company buys Activision Blizzard. That's just my theory. Because sooner or later, let's be honest, Activision Blizzard is falling apart with the sexual crap that's been going around with that company, and it's getting to the point where now we don't know what's going to happen. And Microsoft and Activision are pushing for this deal to go through, and this is going to be a long process. We all know for a fact there is not going to be an ending date in June for this acquisition. It's going to go for another year. That's what's going to happen, because they have to go through all the paperwork, everything. I keep up to date on it over YouTube to find out what's going to happen. I even watch CNBC on YouTube. So, like I said, we'll see what happens. Peace.